Okay, we're going to get started talking about the age of experience, and what a wonderful way to end the last panel to talk about the notion of love in a retail store. And one of the things I want to share that we hope we kind of make the thread throughout the day, these folks who've joined us today, I'll introduce in a minute, have all made a pact, as well as everybody else who's going to be on panels in the future, which is we're going to speak openly and honestly. We're not going to worry about what the PR folks say. But in exchange, please do not ask us questions about a particular retailer that we have worked within. That's how you make sure you don't get in trouble. So with this topic and with the lunch sessions and the ones in the future, please ask a question in generalities so that we can really make this something that's really about open sharing. So the age of experience. Last year, it feels like omni-channel and big data were the big topics, and now experience is everything. Well, we're still trying to get omni-channel right, because somehow people keep thinking about it as just fulfillment. It's not. Omni-channel is also experience design. The store is also a critical point to omni-channel experience design, and we've really heard that validated today. Well, our dream panel is sitting here. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, but what we have here are people who have worked within some of the biggest retailers, ad agencies. They represent culture design, they represent digital design, they represent transformation and innovation. And what they're going to talk about is what the word experience really means and how we need to think about it today in a more elevated way so that what we're doing with digital experience design can fit within that. So I'd like for Shannon to go first, and then Malcolm, and then Brett, and just share with the audience who you are, what you do, and some of the things that you've done in the past.
Hello, my name is Shannan Coghill. Hopefully you guys can all hear me.
Get a little closer to the mic. There you go.
All right, can you guys hear me? Perfect. A little bit closer. Just put it right in front of me. Oh, that's not on. Okay, you guys can hear me now. My name is Shannan Coghill. I am an experience design director currently at Michael Kors. I have only been there for about a year and a half now, but in my past experience, what I focus on is customer experiences and end user experiences. And this crosses over in both like the traditional or the marketing mindset, along with any kind of digital or like mostly digital or omni-channel experiences. So over the course of my career, I've worked in a combination of different institutions, from agencies, working at RGA, moving forward to startups, going into the service industry, and then finally now in retail. And I've been in retail for probably 7 years now, really focusing on who that user is, how does the business, how does technology really improve the user when they come into the store, when they touch any digital touch points that I'm putting out there for them to engage with, how they're engaging and how does that make them feel. I guess that's about it. I'll pass it on to Malcom.
Hi, I'm Malcom Venable. I'm senior editor at TVguide.com, so I cover television industry. Oh, that works. So my background, I've been a journalist for as long as I can remember, covering mostly arts and entertainment, but really specializing and focusing on culture and how people, how arts and entertainment reflects the ways that people are talking about the world, engaging with the world. And so I also worked on the agency side for some time. I worked on packaged goods brands, I did luxury, I did auto. But it was always through, my agency experience was really about how do we harness culture and make it relevant for our brand and make sure that the things that we're doing, saying, the ways we're working in the world reflect how people really think and feel about the world as it is now. So again, through the lens of culture on the agency side. And now I'm back in entertainment, journalism, publishing, and TVguide as a perfect opportunity to reflect the ways that people have changed thinking about television, about digital, and yeah, I think that's enough of a summation.
My name is Brett Snyder. I have worked with Office Depot almost 30 years. started more in communications and creating content, and as the person on staff who knew about televisions and digital content, transitioned into developing digital signage and messaging throughout the company, which has been really exciting the last 6 months or so, because under new leadership, we're now part of a pivot to transform a traditional office supply retailer into a business services and solutions company. And our CEO and leadership aren't looking at our brick and mortar stores as something that we need to shrink, but as sort of the last mile towards our customer to the supply chain. So it allows us to be close to our customer. But in the last few months, they've started to launch new programs for delivering services and subscription-based services to customers. They made a major acquisition in a company called CompuCom, which is an enterprise-level IT services company. And they're going to bring those services now to small and medium businesses. And for retail, the most exciting thing is they have taken the service offering and developed a whole new store layout. And instead of just building one, they remodeled the entire market of Austin, which is 14 or 15 stores. And to cap that off, they built a flagship store in downtown Austin. And we're going to show a video about it.
I'm going to share this, but voice over that one of the things that we're very appreciative of, Brett, is that you brought this to us. A lot of people in the industry don't realize that this store exists. And as we're talking about transformation, as we all mourn the loss of Toys R Us, that we all feel like it didn't have to have happened, this is a great example of seeing sort of an older brand that was in a situation evolving. So let's take a look at it.
We've spent the last 5 years of being involved with mergers and failed mergers and synergies and closing stores, and that's all come to an end. One of the things you'll notice on this to take note is like all of the traditional office supplies now are pushed to the back of the store. When you walk in the front door, the new vision of the company is what hits you.
Let's take a look.
Audio?
We have to break the glass, refill the house.
It took really a village to get this whole project done in the record time we did.
Typically, we had 8 to 9 weeks to do a project, and it was crunched down into a 4-week project.
What makes Austin exciting is it's taken a lot of things that we've contemplated, like moving to services, and putting our capital in place to make it happen. But I think by doing a market, it's going to give us a lot of data, and it's also going to give us a lot of momentum.
There's no doubt that we are all about taking care of business and helping people succeed.
That's why BizBox, Tech Zone, and CPD became the anchors right up front.
In copy and print, you'll notice that there's a separated production area. So now they can have a conversation with your customer and be able to go through the selling process.
3D printing is going to be showcased in the flagship store. This is something that is going to put us on a completely different level than our competitors.
Your tech zone is about solving problems for folks. You're going to get the same services that an enterprise can get because the CompuCom staff is world class.
Dell actually has been a tremendous partner. We have created a store within the store with them. We also did the virtual reality.
In some of our stores, we have an enterprise-level furniture showroom.
You have the opportunity to touch and feel the furniture, visualize what that office is going to look like.
When customers walk in here, sometimes they don't even realize where they're at.
This is where we are now.
It's very sleek.
Very, very clean.
I was planning on being here 5 minutes, but I'm probably going to be here for another hour.
I was like, dang, I need an office built like this.
Everybody tells me how wonderful it looks. They are asking about BizBox.
What we do is we provide the services so we can get business owners
that goes on behind the scenes, whether it's advertising, marketing, even keeping up with taxes.
Well, I needed a logo. The cool thing in working with them, I've been able to give them my input.
It's literally what the name says. It's all business-related stuff that needs to be done in one great big box.
Customer service is awesome. The process is smooth, it's easy, and the next thing is, okay, what more can I do with you?
Hey, this is the new Office Depot. We're services led. We're driving retail to a different level. We want to have a different experience with you.
Now that we know what we were able to do in such a short period of time, we feel very confident that we can attack pretty much every market that is put in front of us.
As we think about the future, it's not just to have a few really amazing stores, it's to create a new feel across the entire chain. This is a step towards that goal.
Isn't that great?
Okay, that's-
I saw titles like Chief Retail Officer and Solutions Advisor and Business Solutions. I mean, this was about services. This is a great example of, we'll talk about this in a minute, culture and changing the role of the store to meet the needs of changing people.
One thing that's interesting is that Kevin, who you see there, who was developed the BizBox service offering through e-commerce and so forth, he's now been moved over to be head of retail. So, before that, we had folks whose entire careers were part of big box retail, and they were great folks. But Kevin, I think, aligned better with our CEO and his vision of where the company needs to go in today's world.
Mm-hmm. So let's continue in that thread, and we'll go on the row here. Brett, how did the narrative of what experience design is change over the past years, and how you guys embraced it differently and the role of leadership? How did that happen? And then I'm going to ask Malcom to talk about that from a culture perspective, and Shannon from her world as well.
Well, I mean, as soon as our CEO came to us, he's been there since last February, so it's a little over a year. Changes started to happen really quickly. It used to be that, even in the corporate offices, we had the dress code. We were allowed to wear jeans on Fridays, and we get the call. It's like the CEO wants to make a video, and they completely change the dress code to where it's business casual, every day. So people are rolling up their sleeves and, wearing casual shirts and blue jeans. And, that was just the beginning. And, even with the store that you see there, that's a project that had been going on, evolving over the last couple of years. And they, upped it and really started to emphasize the services even more. I mean, I think that's part of having leadership that hasn't come from retail. Jerry Smith, our CEO, is not a retailer. He comes from Lenovo and Dell, manufacturing, supply chain, and technology. And so he sort of gets it. He sees the world differently. And, from someone who's there every day, I see it. That's the change that we need to adapt and survive in a world that's changing really quick.
Leadership that walks the walk, not just talks the talk. From your world, Malcom, and I will say I've worked with Malcom as well from BBDO and big traditional agencies. This man is a very wide-angle thinker. And when you look at what's happening, what's in your mind?
Well, just from watching the video, I think it was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense because, I think Starbucks obviously sort of pioneered the idea of the third space. That's what people want to do. They want to be able to go somewhere and be able to write, want to work on their laptops and have coffee as they work. And it's sort of blurring between casual and professional workspaces. It surprises me that you guys just adapted to business casual just so recently because particularly as the workforce has down-aged, young people are not as rigid about whether or not you have on jeans or a t-shirt. The fact of the matter is, can you get the work done? And so, particularly as you want to attract, top talent and pioneering thinkers or forward thinkers, those types of things become less relevant. So anyway, from the video, I thought, those things make perfect sense because they reflect the ways that people are actually engaging with how folks work now. And I think one of the things we would talk about now coming up is just that a lot of the sort of guardians of thought and the sort of gatekeepers of people we thought were in charge of manufacturing how we move through the world are falling down. So I think, from a Hollywood perspective, the Weinstein effect is spilling over into a lot of different industries and having a really pivotal moment of asking, well, why is this person in charge? And those things are changing. And the last thing I'll say is I think for brands and spaces that aren't adapting to that fast enough, they're in jeopardy because they'll look up and they will have everything about them challenged and be irrelevant in a matter of months.
So before we move to Shannon, Malcolm, do you think that this Weinstein effect, that's a really interesting notion. Do you think that's emboldening people to question complacency and to question things 100%. More vocally?
Yeah, I think it's that, and additionally the ways that consumers, I like to say people have been empowered over the past couple of years as a result of the digital revolution. So whether that is government institutions, you see it playing out now as well, people have questioned why, for example, it should be easy to purchase a gun. And then that has an energizing effect through online. People can galvanize very quickly around an idea. And as we just saw in Washington, a lot of people will adapt to that really fast. And then the people who are no longer sort of reflecting the will of the people will be out of office or out of a job.
So Shannon did not mention, I'll brag on her for a minute, that she also headed up digital experience design for omnichannel at Macy's, as well as creative director positions at REI. So you've had a lot of experience around this topic as you've really preached and advocated and tried to push some big brands into thinking about experience. So what do you think is driving the experience design economy right now? And what do you think that people need to be really holding on to around that topic?
Well, I think
a little closer.
So you guys can hear me better. I think that relevancy is really important for a brand. We look at companies or retailers now. They've been in they're 10. You guys still can't hear me. Apparently, I have a soft voice. Is that better? You look at brands now, and there's certain brands that have been along for 20 plus years, and they continue to, make do. They continue to operate in the way that they've operated in the 20-some years, and with minor changes. But in order for brands to continue to be relevant, we have to look at who the users are, and we have to look at what the users are doing, what trends are doing, what culture's doing, and we have to pull that all into a sense of putting the user first, and really kind of exploiting some of the kind of emotions that users have in order to and the wants that the users have in order to push a brand and push an experience that's a little bit more expected from users now, especially with Amazon and how there's a lot of personalization, how a user's expectation of purchasing something should be a little bit more seamless than not. So I actually went to a talk the other day at the Cooper Hewitt, and it was about inclusion design. And this was specifically about how does a museum how does a museum that's very visual, how do they bring in people that have a visual impairment, and how can they go in there and experience the same thing that everybody else can experience? And so they had started talking about inclusion design, which made me start to think about what is inclusion design. And I think that this is an area that we have an opportunity to explore, in the sense of, if somebody were to interact or experience something that you're putting out there for them to experience, how do we make sure that we include everything and everyone in that experience? I mean, obviously, as a UX designer or experience designer as myself, I need to understand who the user is, but I also need to understand who that user is and what are all, and eliminate all biases I have on that user, and how do I make sure that anybody who is, anybody who is different, whether it's gender or politics, or if it's down to this down to like someone who can someone who's not able to see, how can they interact with my experience that is going to hit on all the emotions that I want them to hit on? And a lot of that stuff is me now looking at, okay, so user experience and customer experience is something that could just be that transactional state, or the moment that they step in the store, what happens to them. But I want to look at all of their senses. How can I give them a well-rounded experience that hits on, touch, smell, sight, hearing. Even if they don't have it, I want to make sure that they understand it in a way that they can understand it. And I want to bring that sense of emotion to them that can help them become more of, an ally for the brand, or an advocate for the brand. I did work at Macy's and REI and now Michael Kors. Throughout the time that I worked there, I saw this trends within the store space itself, similar to what's going on in the video, of how stores started to look at the way that they structured their flagships or AC or ABC level stores, and started shifting towards that customer and the customer's needs, and started looking at how they could implement marketplaces into stores. Similar to how you had a couple different marketplaces I noticed in the video, REI especially was looking at how can they start to create marketplaces in the store, and they were looking at Eataly and some of the other non-retail environments on how they can gain insights and benchmarks from them and pull it into their stores. REI was looking at, okay, I know that Eataly has different marketplaces within Eataly that is based around pasta, based around pizza, based around ingredients. Like, how can REI bring that to their store? And they looked at, okay, we have a bicycle shop, we have a snowboarding ski shop, we have a camping shop. Like, we know that customers' needs aren't everything at once, but it could be individualized into these like subsets of marketplaces that they started to divide their stores out into. So I think we have to look at ourselves and look at how the companies and what the brands are, and really emphasize and elevate that user and customer need into more of what current trends are in a kind of personalized way.
So that leads to the next topic, the drivers. Obviously, we've been talking about people wanting to feel something. People want to go into these physical experiences and feel real emotions. Otherwise, it's just functional and transactional. What other drivers is inclusion? What other drivers are out there? And let's start with Malcom and then go over.
Inclusion, I think, is a really important point. I was actually just finishing an article. So in Hollywood right now, there's a lot of talk about, BPB and APD, so before Black Panther and after Black Panther. So that this film, everybody knows now this film has crossed the $1 billion mark. And it's as if people just woke up to the revelation that people want to see themselves on screen. And so inclusion can sometimes make people feel a little bit itchy because it involves race and gender and all these things that are kind of awkward to talk about for some people. But I think if you think about it on the other side, it was think of how much money could have been made over the past 30 years if you just simply thought to yourself, oh, maybe, people who aren't, white want to see themselves on the movie screen. It's not like a complicated idea. But it took so long for that to happen because the director had to have gone to school and the actors had been in that place in that time. And so here we are. But I think, again, the point is Black Panther should be, a wake-up call across a whole bunch of industries. Like, if you're not including these large segments of people, then you're leaving money on the table. And yeah, that was one more point I was going to make about Black Panther. But yeah, I think that's just a gigantic wake-up call for everybody.
We sure saw that in advertising too, didn't we?
Yeah.
We really did. And for our world, as we're doing digital content, as we're serving different and more diverse types of people, we have to be thinking about that. Because these are our shoppers. The world is moving into this totally different world, and so are the expectations of them as people.
Yeah.
And the technology has made them empowered people.
Yeah. And I guess the thing I would almost blanked out on a second ago was there used to be this myth, right, that like mainstream audiences won't pay for content that's majority minority, right? Like the idea used to be that essentially white audiences wouldn't want to see a film or TV show that didn't have white people in it. But that's not true. Like Black Panther's proven that, as dozens of other TV shows and films have proven. So I think, again, it's sort of getting over those biases. You just have to get over it and think about, like, we're leaving money on the table, let's fix it, and let's welcome people, otherwise you're missing out.
Yeah. Brett, what kind of biases do you see starting to evolve from what you guys have done? Did you have some biases that you've had to really break through? As in, let's talk about the role of a store. All the years I've known Brett, back in the day, there was still this notion that the merchant was in full control and that the people who owned the retail brand were in full control and that we were like trapped people inside the store. And as digital started to evolve, it was, you can get these people's eyeballs and we're gonna get budget from broadcast and we're gonna get some reach and frequency and we're gonna make the advertisers pay for it. Talk to us a little bit about how the business has evolved beyond those kind of biases.
Well, a lot of things have had to change over the years. It's like we have a CMO that's been on board now 4 or 5 months. And I know, like, in one of her presentations, there's a tombstone with BAU on it, which is like she's saying it's the death of business as usual, and she's out to change the way the business thinks about everything. And she's forcing that on every facet of the business beyond just what her core focus of marketing is. And we've kind of been doing things on our own, but I think in the last few weeks they signed a contract with WPP and all the companies underneath that, so that's Young and Rubicam for advertising and MediaCom for I think digital and things, and Landor for branding. And I think you can look to, the whole brand being transformed and finally being all brought into one. You see they put a big BizBox sign, and that's what's big, and Office Depot is little. So that may be a hint to come. We'll see how that all shakes out. But yeah, a lot of the prejudices, it's like some of the new things they're trying is that, internally, they developed a millennial council. So that's like a group of people that have been recently hired that work in the company that are under 30, and as they are coming up with ideas and looking at changes, they run it through the Millennial Council to see how they can improve it. It's because, as our CEO would say, it's like he wants to reach consumers that don't look like him. Because the future is being able to get the young entrepreneurs and so forth. You just can't, go with your tried and true, customers anymore.
There's humility in that. And that's not an attribute we talked about in the past in the leadership. And that's also really inspiring to see. We don't have all the answers anymore, so we have to seek them. That's fantastic. So let's talk about other strategic pillars for this experience design topic. We talked about inclusion. Shannon, what else are you thinking about? And will you touch on the Uncanny Valley? That was a really interesting thought that you shared when we prepared.
I don't remember what that thought was. But, I think, I think Malcolm actually sprung up that thought earlier when we first had the conversation, and it's the idea of what, is everybody familiar with the Uncanny Valley? It's basically the idea of like a computer system or technology that is almost too close to a human and trying to represent a person or a being. And there's a possibility when it becomes too close that there's a kind of a risk where people are kind of, they're a little bit, I don't want to use this word, but I'm going to, a little bit repulsed or, they're thrown back by it because it becomes too personalized, too fake in a way. I'm going to totally use the word fake. Because I think that everybody wants authenticity, and they don't expect. I mean, there are multiple different types of people out there. Ones that are really willing to take, really willing to accept to this, and then other people that are really put off by it. So, from my experience, what I need to do, and in order to produce something that may be personalized or customized, or implemented in a way that is technology acting as humans, is kind of putting an access together and understanding who my demographic is, what level of comfort are they at using this type of technology, and understanding or having a system or data or a computer talk to them on a level of a person. I honestly think there's no right and wrong answer right now, because we're just coming to the age of where this is starting to be a little bit more implemented in our lives, inserted in our lives in unexpected ways. Amazon is a great example of it, how Alexa and now the doorbell, I forget what the name of the doorbell is, but how that's all being used to kind of, in a sense of like Internet of Things, and how that's serving up advertisements, serving up products, kind of the predictability of what you're going to purchase, and giving you, more customized ads. So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because when I worked in luxury hotels, it was the opposite.
Yeah.
Because luxury hotels have so long worked under the assumption that the minute the person walks in the door, they want you to grab their bag and start talking to them and cater to their every need. But the younger consumers are the exact opposite. It's like, I don't really want to do that. I can take my bag up to my room myself. And so I'd rather you not hover over me. So I think exactly to your point, it's about understanding who our target is and how do we sort of make things customizable for every customer.
Well, if you don't understand the target, then how are you going to make sure you're including them and that you're going to be relevant with what you're trying to do? Because relevance in the eyes of the beholder, right? And then there's the whole notion of people come to a space, they actually want to have some fun too.
Yeah.
They want to have something that can, as we'll talk about in a minute, light their brain up differently. Because
Sure.
again, we don't want to be about functional transaction. We want people to want to go to that place and space and to have a moment that really mattered. So let's talk about cultural anthropology, since that was a world we all lived in, and talk about what that is and how to cultivate a lens of cultural anthropology and a sense of empathy with this digital experience design topic. We want to start, then we'll go to Brett.
Well, I will just, to be a little bit more lowbrow, I stopped into a Toys R Us a week ago because I was just curious. And I think, on a very fundamental level, cultural anthropology is about curiosity, how are people moving, what are they doing? So I just want to go in the store and look at it. And the minute I walked in, this is in California, in Burbank, I was just taken aback because I hadn't been into a Toys R Us in I don't know how long. But the first thing that struck me beyond how sort of beige and bland the store was like there's no place to play with the toys. So, I mean, I'm an adult, kind of, but even if I was a kid, this is not fun. So there's no place to play with the toys. And on a functional level, it's very difficult to think about, okay, how we design the space so that people could actually play with the toys. Obviously, you couldn't have people play with every single toy, but you could have an activation where Mattel lets you make a Barbie situation or whatever. But I mean, so it was a perfect example of how a brand hadn't really thought about people or hadn't really thought about how to engage with people in the 21st century. It's a perfect opportunity to have a space where parents take their children to just play and have fun. But it seemed like, it felt like the store had designed itself to sell me as much crap as possible, but not actually enjoy the time in the store at all. So it's really unfortunate that, it's sort of succumb to the situation that it is, but it's not surprising.
Yeah.
It reminds me, it's like when we did the focus groups in developing the remodel project, they got consumers together, and we had a whole full-size mock-up store and bring people into it and get their reactions to it. And as part of this process, one of the groups was going to tour our existing store because they just wanted to compare people's reactions. And for those of us that work in retail every day, we go into the old store and we look at it and we see that it's dingy and yellow and the tile on the floor is all torn up and we cringe about it. But when the customers all come in, they were fine with it. They were like, oh yeah, it has what I need, it's my local store. And it was like really surprising. It's like, really, is this sort of okay? And then someone had this idea at the last moment. It's like, let's see how many of these customers we can get into the new store. Because one of the questions they were asked in the existing store is like, it's got the stuff that you need, but what's the store that you look forward to going to? Where do you really like to go? And they're like, well, Crate and Barrel, it's got all kinds of cool stuff. Or, I like going to Best Buy just to see all the stuff. So we were doing okay, but we weren't really emotionally engaging the customers. They came to our store kind of because they had to, because they needed something and they expected us to have it. But when we took them into the new store, it's like they were sort of like blown away of how clean it looked, how much easier it was to find things, all their critiques about it. They were like, in their mind, it's like we listened to them and we built the new store overnight from their feedback, a couple of days before. So a lot of it has been, listening to customers. And a lot of it still has to do with a culture change. It's like we built the pretty stores, but we still have old warehouse mentality for things. I was in a meeting recently with our new head of retail, and he was, telling, the regional management that, the days of where a customer comes in and it's like, welcome to Office Depot, what brings you in today? I need a binder. Oh, well, the binders are over here. How many pages do you need? 200? Okay, here's your binder. And that was, not long ago, that was the model for success. The person bought the binder, they spent $3.29, and away they go. And with the world of Amazon and things like that, that's got to change. And so now they have to change the culture. When someone comes in, it's like, I need a binder. Oh, really? What business are you in? It's training people to have a conversation and learn more about business. It's also changing, it's changing the pay model. Years and years and years ago, we used to have different bonuses and commissions and things, and as things got tight, that all went away. And next thing you know, you've got over 100% turnover in retail. So now they're looking at it all with new, fresh eyes, and they're having bonus programs, and they're starting to incent people, to help push the change in culture.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think just obviously we haven't known each other very long, but the very notion of office has changed so much within the past couple of years. They increasingly shift away from paper products in the first place. So, that renders a lot of stuff irrelevant.
The boss says it's technology is the office supply of the future.
There you go.
Oh, that's a good one.
I think it's wonderful that you're challenging the environment too, because you know that the users are different now. So rather than looking at the notion of maybe there's something wrong, something wrong with the users and or trying to cure that, in a sense, you're looking at the very foundation and the environment on which your business is based on, and you're changing that, and now you're changing changing the need, you're changing the use, you're changing the emotion, you're changing everything about like what your business is doing, based on trends, based on culture, based on empathy, and now you're starting to provide something to them that is valuable and likable and reliable to them.
Well, and the transition to focus more on services is that, we want a stickier relationship with the customers, not a transactional relationship. So, we want a subscription model to where, so much per month, and, you've got 24/7 tech support, and we can monitor your computer or your network, and you don't have to worry about viruses and things like that. We'll take care of all that for you. So there's a big shift in that sort of relationship to get out of just the simple transaction stuff. Because if it's simple transactions, again, people have a phone and they can do that wherever.
They'll come into your store once a year versus having brand affinity and awareness and love the brand and want to come back just for the experience.
We can't win that war.
No.
So we've got 10 minutes. I want to make sure everyone has a chance to ask questions, but one of the things that we talked about when we prepared is really coming through. It's just worth calling out. And it's what are the attributes you need to really have to be very successful with experience design? And we are all in the room now experience designers. That is the new world order. And I think coming through this, we talked about empathy, and you have to be curious, not just about your category, not about your project, but everything happened in the world, because that's what feeds your opportunities, right? It also feeds your friction points. We have to be timely. Toys R Us was not. You were at Office Depot.
Chapter,
Hey.
We'll see a year from now.
Brave, purposeful, and you have to know what your brand stands for. There's nothing worse from our point of view than seeing someone come up with something because it's sexy and cool, but has nothing to do with what the brand stands for, what the retail is promising, and what people are expecting. Yeah. That's really important. I see Ed has a microphone over there. Can we go ahead and start asking some questions? We'll start with Adrian and then Brandon.
Yes, I have a Brett, I guess, towards you. I have a question with regard to your new design. Fantastic. Can you comment to, typically these designs take money, and typically they will use your vendors to support those ideas. Can you comment, as Center Store shrinks and you're creating this space, how are your vendors commenting, and what comments, and how are they monetizing? Maybe could you comment to that?
What's their role, all that stuff?
Well, I mean, in the Austin market and in the flagship, they did a store within a store with Dell, because Dell's, a Texas company, and so forth. But I think it has less vendor participation than it is done traditionally. If you work in retail, it's like the vendor money. It's like candy. It's bad, and it's like everyone wants it, but it clouds their judgment and their thinking of what's, best for the whole experience. Because a vendor is only focused on what's good for them. Plus, even though it may look sexy and so forth, I guarantee you that they went through looking at every nickel and every penny on that. I know for permitting and expense and so forth, like having a wall, it's like they didn't want to build a wall, and they went and took our existing steel, our existing steel shelving and so forth, and bolted what appears to be a wall on it, but from a building permit point of view, it's just a fixture. So there's a lot of things going on that you don't see at a quick glance that are done as cost savings and so forth, even like all the TVs and so forth, all that was done at costs that could not have been done 5 years ago or so. And, we didn't use a special AV integrator. I was the one, I architected it, but I'm the one who came up with how it would work. So, it was a collaborative effort, but it was all sort of done internally at the lowest cost we possibly could do it.
Wow, that's really something.
Brendan?
Brandon Gabriel from the Imagine family of companies. I actually had a chance 2 weeks ago at South by Southwest to see the store in Austin. Congratulations. For someone who's been an active customer and seen the transition from kind of your traditional model to where you're going in innovation, I'd be curious how you're fostering innovation inside your culture. Is that something you're bringing from the outside in or the inside out? Because it seems like it's a obviously you're disrupting yourself, right, to stay relevant in the marketplace. But I'm curious how you're getting your teams internally on that kind of bandwagon.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, to give you an idea, they just did, you think that like surveying your associates and so forth is something that everyone does. Office Depot hadn't done it in 12 years. And they just now did it, and they want to improve the organization from within. I mentioned that we just signed like a new agency and branding companies and so forth, but they haven't even begun to start work yet. Everything's been done internally, but I think it in the culture, the everyday thing is like you can't do things the way that you've always done them, and business as usual is dead, and everyone is forced to rethink everything they've ever done and to think of a way of doing it differently, because there are stores like Toys R Us and things like that are going away, and if we want to survive, we have to adapt and change.
Brett, it sounds like your leader is really pushing that, and through all the stories you've been telling, and I know, Shannon, you've experienced this too, leadership is so critical.
Leadership's, the truth is, it's all about having a new leader, and Jerry, and, if you were to sit in the same room with him, you would see his brain is spinning 100 miles an hour in all different sort of directions, and he really has a lot of ideas that are coming from totally new perspectives. And before we had people, our CEO before that, he was an expert on cranking out merger synergies, and his pay package was focused on merger synergies, and you could argue that some of the decisions that were made were not necessarily effective long-term solutions, but delivered numbers for Wall Street. And the guy we have now, our stock is down. We're a great buy. Office Depot stock is on sale. But he is focused. He's focused long-term, and he has the buy-in from the board of directors. It's good that we have a board now that has accepted these changes and knows that they're not going to be making any windfalls in the for the next year. Mm-hmm. Another thing that's interesting is that they flat out said it. It's like, we're not closing stores anymore. Enough of this. It's hard to year over year your sales keep going down. Well, they keep going down because you keep closing stores. Yeah. And it's like, enough, unless there's a really compelling situation, and they're just not going to do it.
So we're at the top of our time. Can we take one more question?
Hi, I'm Matt Neutrer from Bose. And I have a question about the transition from an architectural view of spaces to the experience view of spaces. And when you make that transition from, you know, boxes for people to walk into to places for people to interact and have social experiences, can you tell me a little bit, I guess all of you really, can you tell me a little bit about the major pain points that you had going from that architectural experience transition to this customer-facing experience transition?
You know, I wasn't part of the team who really made those decisions, so I can't add a lot to it. I think the thing that's most interesting is that it's no secret that big box retail has been they've been shrinking the stores, they've been reducing the number of SKUs and items available in the stores, and depending on where your lease is with your landlord, you know, we've got stores, we've made the store smaller, we've got all this empty space in it, and now they're looking at using that for these collaborative work areas and co-work areas and making use of that space rather than just having it all shuttered off. So that's something that's being looked at.
So I don't have a ton of experience in that traditional realm, but I think we talked about previously why Amazon was doing so well, and I think the bottom line is that they figure out what people want and they just get it done. They don't make excuses. And so I think in a wider context, like, you know, people have come together to fix healthcare. Elon Musk has, you know, gone to Mars. You can figure out how to put up a wall in a store.
I'm gonna kind of focus on like more of the individual. So you have individual brands, and each individual brand has a different meaning. They have a different goal that they're trying to achieve. And you have to, whatever you're, and I'm going to also talk about technology, how can you implement that into an architectural like format. Like I believe if you were to pay attention to what the brand's needs are and who the brand is, and then you were to implement technology within an architectural space or in a space that doesn't feel like technology, meaning that, you know, I work for Michael Kors currently. I don't think they would ever put a video screen on their wall. They would want to, you know, cover it in some kind of way that made it feel like it was on brand, that it was luxury, that it was elevated, that it didn't, you know, disrupt the consumer's, you know, path on how they shop, but it enhanced it versus disrupting it. So I think that, like, you know, technology is great when it's implemented in stores, but it needs to be implemented in the right way so that it doesn't disrupt the customer as they move through the store.
Guys were wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was really good.